This is a huge gamble for the Vancouver Canucks as insiders have revealed the Vancouver Canucks' next move, and this is holding up the rest of the National Hockey League as the Vancouver Canucks are actively trying to fill the second line center position. We're going to break down all these reports, how this player fits, and exactly why this does and does not make sense for the Vancouver Canucks, and more later on this episode. Before we get into that, if you haven't hit that sub button yet, we're trying to reach a goal of 18,000 subscribers. If you want to go down and hit, it's completely free. It helps us out a ton, and in return, we'll give you updates from all around the National Hockey League, from the Vancouver Canucks, the Calgary Flames, the Toronto Maple Leafs, all the way to the Pittsburgh Penguins. So go down and hit that free subscribe button. But with that, let's just hop straight into this report today, dears, where we did see Rick Dhaliwal speaking out on a free agent the Canucks have been linked to, but he said, for those asking, not sure where this goes, but the Canucks continue to talk with UFA Jack Roslovic's camp. Now, there's even more reports with how much he might make, how much his camp is asking for, and even more on the Canucks. But before we get into that, listen, Jack Roslovic is a very interesting one. A lot of teams are reaching out. The young center's looking for what? His third home over his NHL career. He's trying to find a spot to join a team and join a middle six. What is your thoughts on the Canucks being linked yet again and very hardly linked to Jack Roslovic?
Well, first of all, this player and this move, no matter where he goes, and again, we're going to talk about it as it pertains to the Vancouver Canucks, is holding up the rest of the National Hockey League. Don't get it twisted. This move is holding up a lot of teams from making trades and other moves that they need to make, because there's a lot of teams that actually do want this guy. Now he's come out, and again, we're going to get to it, and said what he wants to make, what he wants on a contract. But this is, first of all, a player that I think can help any team in this league at this point. He can score goals. He can do a lot of different things. He's quite dynamic, actually. He can play wing and center as well. We'll get to that too, because I know you have a point to make about that. But, he can play both positions. I'm not necessarily a fan of players that can do that, because to me, you're not, the greatest at either position. Like, obviously, you'd want a player who plays one position and is really good at it. But nonetheless, he's a player that I think can help a lot of teams. And Vancouver is a team that does need help, especially in one position in particular.
And I think the big thing is Roslovic's coming off a 20-goal season with the Carolina Hurricanes. The last time he did that was back in 21-22 with the Columbus Blue Jackets, but low ice time, under 14 minutes. He did play center for a bit of this season with Carolina as well. 400 faceoffs, but still almost 55% on the dot. There's a lot to like about Jack Roslovic, and it does fill into where the Canucks can fit him and can they afford him. Listen, the Canucks did move out Dakota Joshua to clear up cap space. They've been continuing looking for cap flexibility. This is going all the way to Teddy Bluger's name still circulating, but the biggest thing is we see Jack Roslovic and his camp apparently asking for a 2 or 3 year deal just over $3 million. Now, this does work within the Canucks cap. We can see at the moment $3.2 million. But the big thing is there's a lot of teams in on this. The Canucks are seemingly the most consistent on it. Everything is kind of pointing to Jack Roslovic, the center/swinger, joining this Canucks team, but it does leave a question mark on, does this fill enough of the void? Listen, we both have different opinions on this right now. If you want my full Canucks side of opinion, go to check out Canucks Digest, shameless plug on that as well. But the big thing is this Canucks team is desperately looking for a center position in the second line. Now, some Canucks fans, a little bit delusional sometimes, say Pettersson should be a third liner, but listen, Pettersson is the number one center. You need to fill the second. The big thing with this is you still have Filip Chytil on a team, Teddy Bluger, Aatu Ratu. What is your thoughts on maybe a stopover gap? We know a lot of teams are looking for center, looking for top six help. If the Canucks can get him on a reasonable contract, 2 years at $3 million, do you think this makes sense from the Canucks side?
So when you look at the Vancouver Canucks, right, not just on paper, I want to get to on paper in a second, but, if you factor in all the health issues, all of that with some of the players or health concerns, they're a flawed team. They do have a lot of solidified spots, and they're actually very strong, but they do have a glaring hole, and that is right up the middle, right? Elias Pettersson, obviously the number one guy, but the rest of the way, you almost have zero depth, right? And of course, you're looking at a lineup now that is a mock lineup with Roslovic there, and I think that could actually make some sense. And that's the only way that I think this makes sense, is because of the contract details that you just threw out, what they're looking for, what his camp is looking for. It's a 2 or 3 year deal, so short term, relatively short term, and only $3 million or just north of $3 million a year. You can afford that if you're the Canucks. And then it's a kind of an option where very similarly with Jake Allen with the Montreal Canadiens, it was kind of a stopgap option where it was like, all right, you're just going to fill the the gap for a couple of years. And then we know that we have a couple guys on the way to fill that void. So that could make some sense. But again, he's not necessarily known as a center, can play some center. So is that really the answer if you're the Vancouver Canucks? That second line center, which I think is interesting. It pushes, like you put here, Hedl to the wing, which actually might suit him better with a lot of his concussion issues and obviously health issues and all of that as well. So that could make some sense. It could make some sense is the point I'm trying to make. But ultimately, I don't think this is the right option. Do you want to handcuff yourself, even though it is short term, and that's why it could make some sense? You want to handcuff yourself in this situation where he is the answer. He is the second line center. He's being forced to play there. Will he find success? I could find it as an attractive option for him, the player himself, to come to Vancouver. He's playing second line minutes. He can put up a bunch of points on a shorter term deal, cash out when the salary cap is going up. It does make a lot of sense in that way. But ultimately, is this the answer if you're the Vancouver Canucks? I'm not so sure if this is the answer for your second line center, a guy that doesn't necessarily play center.
And I think the big thing is this is the Canucks team that's going to continue looking for the center. We know they're linked to Marco Rossi. We see Mason McTavish, which is a dream that Canucks fans wish we had down the middle, but it does make sense in a kind of stopover gap. I know a lot of fans are looking at Pius Suter and saying, why not bring him back? But the big thing, and looking at the bright side of Jack Roslovic, is, listen, he has taken faceoffs. We've seen a lot during Columbus, all a little sub 50%. We've seen last year 54% on just under 400. But the big thing with Jack Roslovic is more ice time means more opportunities. A top six role means more points. So you're looking at a guy that could go out and put up 50 to 60 points. Is he the long-term option at center? Probably not, but there is a chance. And listen, we could dream of that if you get a second line center for sub $4 million. But the big thing with Jack Roslovic and where the Canucks stand, we know what they're looking at. They don't want to move on from core pieces, their young prospects, Tom Willander, Jonathan Lekmacki, D. Petey, all these players the Canucks want to hold on to, with every team buying except for the Pittsburgh Penguins, who apparently want to sell everyone to get Sidney Crosby, for God's sakes. But this is the team that doesn't want to pay a premium, and you're paying a premium on top of other people outbidding you. So Jack Roslovic, in my sense, would be, hey, pick him up on a 2-year deal. You work with it. If he works, it's cool. Go into the postseason with him as your center. But the big thing is, I think this move gives them the flexibility to maybe even go look for a Marco Rossi, look for a McTavish, or a veteran center that they could acquire a trade deadline, make that push, move Roslovic to the third line, the wing, whatever it might be. Do you think this is the situation where the Canucks are looking at it and saying, hey, we don't want to overpay for a guy right now. We know we need it, but we think the value could drop over the season, and Roslovic could be a piece that helps out in the near future at center and wing if he transitions?
Yeah, I think in that way it does make sense. Again, like it's an option that, there aren't many options in free agency right now. And this is a guy that I think, is holding up the rest of the league. Talked about it a little bit off the top of the episode in terms of, his decision will really determine what other teams do via trade or, with the rest of the free agents. So I feel like he's looking at the Canucks like this is a massive opportunity for me to play second line minutes. And for the Canucks, again, it does make a little bit of sense. I just don't know long term or even like past this year, if you do sign him to a 2 or 3 year contract, is that the answer? I just don't think so, right? Like that's, especially if you want to push towards the playoffs again, all the stuff that's happening with Quinn Hughes as well. The fact that, New Jersey's kind of in the mix or kind of looming. I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but it's been talked about. So is that the answer? If you want to push towards the playoffs again, I'm not too sure. But it is an option that if there's nothing left on the table, you have no trade chips, you don't want to trade for a second line center or make that much of a commitment via trade either. This is a guy that can come in, can play in that role. And we've seen that he has had successful seasons when given the opportunity. He's played third line roles on other teams and maybe hasn't had the best output, but you're playing on the third line, right? So at a second line center, keep in mind too, his point production on the Canucks might actually not be that great because he is playing center. He's going to have a greater responsibility defensively as well. So for a couple of those reasons, I don't think it's the answer for the Canucks, but I could see if they do end up making this move and they do sign him, why it makes sense. I can't understand that. So it's going to be very interesting. I think all the dominoes are going to start falling as soon as Jack Roslovic signs. And I think that all signs right now might be pointing to the Vancouver Canucks just because of the opportunity.
And I think that's the big thing. Patrik, Allvin, and Jim Rutherford might hit the panic button, sign this guy, and hope that it works. You're throwing something at the wall, hoping it sticks, trying to get back to the postseason after bringing back your full core on extensions or returning players like Brock Besser. Canucks fans, what's your thoughts on this? What's your thoughts on Jack Roslovic being connected once again to the Vancouver Canucks? We know they're actively looking. We know they want to get better. Do you think this fits well? And to anyone else watching that's not a Canucks fan, do you think this is the first domino to fall when we see Roslovic sign? Could we see a bunch of trades happening? This could set the tone on everything. What would you guys' thoughts? Go down and leave a comment down below. While you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We'll be back in another episode, so keep your eye out for that. But I've been your host, Mark, with my co-host, Darius, and take care.